Hello, hello, everybody. We are going to get started here in just a minute. Welcome to the RAAC training series. And today's topic is essential strategies to support employees with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But while we wait to get started, I have just a little question just to get our brains moving here on this Monday morning. What is a workplace support that makes a big impact? And this can be just in general, in your own experience. What is a workplace support that makes a big impact for you or for your employees? So just share that in the chat while we wait to get started here. Just give everybody a minute or two. I love that. Like open communication with leadership. That's
I'm gonna be
great.
listening and working at the same time.
Okay, all right. Do you want me to close the door?
No, you can leave it open.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So,
Yeah,
we're
I
on.
love that. Natural supports. Yeah, great. Thank you. We are just giving everybody a minute or two to enter the room. And while we're waiting, I just have a question to get our brains in gear here this morning on a Monday morning. What is a workplace support that makes a big impact? Yeah, I love that. I love these ideas. Awesome. Yeah, those natural supports. They are true champions out there. Okay, awesome. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. Well, probably for the remainder, because we have these awesome presenters who are going to take it from here in just a minute. We have Katie Dart and Jenna Keeper from the IDD Education Center. So I get to work with these ladies all the time. I'm super fortunate for that. And they are going to take it from here. So Katie, I'll let you get it started, and you guys can introduce yourselves and share who you are and what you do when the time comes.
Sorry, I'm moving my Zoom bar because it's in the way of me doing everything right now.
Yes.
Love that. Okay. Here we go. How's that look?
Looks great.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Jenna and I are excited to be here. Today we will be sharing essential strategies to support employees with intellectual and developmental disabilities. My name is Katie Dart. I am the Associate Director of Vocational Services for the IDD Education Center. I do have some familiar people here as I was watching people join. You might also know me as current CEAS Director, so I'll be slowly fading out of that position into really the Director of Vocational Services over the next year. Jenna?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenna Keeper. I'm the Director of Impact Innovation, our adult day program with the IDD Ed Center. So, but I was formerly a vocational coordinator for an inclusive post-secondary ed program. So I'm really excited to work on this with Katie and kind of meld together some of our knowledge to share with you all. So.
Absolutely. And Jenna and I are lucky, right? We're always thinking about ways that we can support our employer partners, right? And how that support for our employer partners really supports the individuals that we serve and their employment goals. And those are all a little bit different. So how we're actually going to start off today, Jenna and I thought it was really important. There are supportive structures and supported services we put in place prior to accommodations and use of evidence-based practice and individual supports. And that really sits with all of the best practices that research and just from our experiences really lead to those sustainable healthy employer relationships that then can lead to gainful employment training opportunities. So we're going to kind of focus on building best practices around building those sustainable partnerships with employers. And then Jenna's going to then be describing more of those individualized supports and best practices that we like to see to support the employee once they are hired or engaging in some type of training program with that employer partner. Okay. So our agenda, introductions we've already done. Like I said, we're going to talk about building employer relationships and developing those sustainable employment pathways. Then Jenna will move into promoting independence and self-determination and communication recommendations. And communication recommendations are always huge on our end. Okay, so why, right? Why are we having these conversations? Why is this important to our community? And why is this important to the IDD Education Center? So we know, right, that employment outcomes for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are significantly lower, right, compared to peers without disabilities. So we know we need to engage in this work. And I do think we just wanted to have some shared language. So when we're talking about employment, we are talking about community integrated employment, which means to work for pay and integrated settings where individuals without disabilities are also working alongside you. So we just wanted to make sure we have some shared language with that today. So we know employment rates for people with disabilities are lower. We have made great strides over the years in our local community and nationally to improve those outcomes. And some of these best practices that we're going to share have been a part of that work. So why does important matter, right? Why does employment matter, right, to people, humans in general, right? So I want to give, when I was developing this, I really wanted to give a lot of the whys, right? If you are an employer here that is thinking about either hiring an individual with a disability or engaging in an agency or center similar to the IDD Education Center, we want to give you that ammunition, right? We want to give you the power to take that back to your team and your partners. So the benefits are great, right? We know that employment improves mental health. Employment also creates higher social inclusion and social networking opportunities. It creates greater financial independence, right, which we know is going to also improve mental health outcomes for individuals. It improves physical health, and it also encourages and improves higher self-esteem and purpose for the individuals that we are serving. And that's not moving now. There we go. Okay, so again, why does this matter? So it matters to the individual to promote quality of life outcomes, right? But it also has a greater impact on our community. So what are the economic advantages for an employer, right, to engage in hiring individuals with disabilities? You will have reduced public expenditure, right? People who have gainful employment might not be looking to some of those government-funded programs like Social Security and Medicaid. Some individuals still need that throughout their lifetime, but if they don't, right, and can work towards full-time gainful employment, that's what we want to see. There's increased tax revenue, improved business performance. I remember over the years as we were building our natural support model with Airmark, all of the personal stories that we would hear from those natural supports and their enjoyment, right? Their quality of life when they would show up to work. So the impact not only was on the individuals we were serving, but the natural supports themselves. I had many people say, I feel like a teacher. I've never felt this purposeful in my job or haven't felt this way in a long time. So we know it improves everyone's quality of life within that work setting. Economic empowerment and poverty reduction. And then, of course, a diversified workplace and innovative strategies. So not only is it a benefit to the employer, but it is also a benefit to the individual themselves. Any questions before I move on? And I am very informal, so if we do have questions, I know they might go into the chat. So Sadie or Jenna, please stop me at any time. Okay, so I said to Sadie, I think it's really important that we tell our story. So myself as a job developer, when I go out and say, I'm going to identify an employer partner in engineering, right? It doesn't really matter what type of career pathway, but there are some best practices that we have established. So I'll start with know your goal and know your ask. Employers are constantly receiving requests from their community, right? It might be training opportunities, job interviews, right? Students just engaging in career exploration, career awareness. It could be for job placement. So I think within your agency, make sure you know your goals. So we have spent a tremendous amount of time really honing in on what are our vocational services within the IDD Education Center. What should we be targeting? What can we target? And then how do our employer partnerships fit into that? So before you're reaching out to an employer partner, make sure you know your goal of how you would like to interact with that employer partner and know your ask. So I just gave some different examples of how the IDD Education Center uses employer partnerships. It could be for short-term work experiences. It could be job shadowing. Apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships are a huge area that we are looking for employer partnerships. So all I'm saying is employers are asked a lot, right? They are asked a lot from the community. So just know your ask and know your goal. Okay, so once you know your ask and you know your goal and you have your vocational services really well identified, what are those really important components in developing a sustainable partnership? And I will tell you that we utilize every single one of these components, and if we didn't, our employer relationships would not be sustainable. And we are very fortunate to have hundreds of employer relationships that we kind of engage with on multiple levels. So the very first one is to have a shared vision and commitment, right? Why are we engaging in this partnership and why is this valuable not only to the employer partner, but the agency or the individual? We have to have clear communication and defined roles. The IDD Education Center puts a lot of focus on this because we know it's an essential component, the training and support for employers. We generally, right, are the expert coming in on how to support our employees. So what are we proactively offering that employer? And then how are we customizing that along the way to make sure as our partnership and our collaboration goals grows that we are flexing where we need to. We want to make sure that employers are familiar with the incentives and the types of supports that can be offered to them. And then that evaluation and continuous improvement plan. How does the employer partner, the agency, or the individual or supported services work through any barriers or challenges as the relationship grows? Okay.
Katie,
Yeah, go ahead.
we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
So with the recent flurry of laws being passed to eliminate creating special considerations for certain groups of people, do you see initiatives, which I believe in, being challenged or terminated? And I answered a little bit. I mean, the short answer is yes, where I know our center specifically has lost NSF funding that was focused on customizing employment for people with IDD in STEM fields. But do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think this will be an encouraging statement. Other than the NSF, the political atmosphere has not changed one employer relationship that we have, even new ones that are being built. So I would say we are not seeing a direct impact on that currently, but we are really, really well aware of the challenges that could come from that. So I would say lean on their HR departments. So I would say our strongest relationships are the employer partners that we also have a really strong relationship with the human resource department, as the political atmosphere always changes. So I think if you have that direct contact within the business, I would stay very close to them during these times that are really kind of unknown, but we have not seen it be a barrier at all right now. So I can just speak day to day. Jenna, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you just think about a process standpoint of employer relations, right, the benefits and those kind of things that align with some of those employment initiatives are one component that we discuss with employers when building partnerships, right? But there is still all of the other bonuses and positives about employing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities or any disability, right? And there's a lot more of those social positive components. And it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket to talk about the tax breaks that come or whatever initiatives might come because you're specifically employing somebody with a disability, but that's not the entire piece of the puzzle. That shouldn't be the primary motivator, right? And I think what Katie is talking about is you can never underestimate the power of a connection with somebody in a relationship. And that's what we kind of have to capitalize on right now when things are so uncertain. So
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Just again, the shared vision and defined roles kind of leads right into that. So how can we be proactive? What measures can we have in place knowing we have no control of the political atmosphere, right? Or those type of changes. And I would say, and the very first thing that we always do, right, is we are co-creating those partnership goals. And that looks really different for all of our services. For example, for a pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship, right, these are state-approved operating plans. So we work directly with our employer partners to identify competencies, training outcomes that they would like to see from our interns, and we do that collectively, right? Those are documented in a state-approved operating plan, and then we use those, right, to guide our collaboration and engagement. With other employer partners, we've used MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, and that really outlines roles and responsibilities within that partnership. It can be edited very easily. So I would say with your partnerships, document, right? Document the roles, document the agreements. And if you can have something in a written format, we would definitely recommend that. It just supports accountability and the growth of that partnership. Highlight the mutual benefits, right? Why are we engaging in this? Is there reduced turnover in a specific area, right? We're working with a lot of employer partners right now that are doing some very targeted training and hiring, right? So learning the needs of those employer partners and really being able to highlight the benefit of that collaboration. And then engage in leadership early. So that's also what we were referring to. Who are your champions, right? I think we know there always has to be a champion. Those can be different people, managers, supervisors, human resources, right? Like I just mentioned earlier, is a great champion to have. But who is that touch point, right? Who is that individual you can go to, who will advocate on behalf of that partnership or the employee, right? I'm talking a little bit broadly here, right? We're talking about individuals that may be hired on or just different ways of engaging with employer partners. And then sharing those success stories. Our success stories are huge, right? We're just about to do another one with our engineering pre-apprenticeship. What can we hand over to that employer partner to show them the success that you might have through collaborating? Okay, so co-create your partnerships, make sure things are documented. And there's a couple of different examples. We've also done letters of commitment. So if you guys need any other suggestions, please let us know. We're happy to provide those. But co-create your partnership and make sure it is documented. Make sure your goals align with one another. Highlight the mutual benefits. Find your champion early, right? Find your champion early and share your success stories. So these are kind of the first four that I would say anytime we're engaging in a new partnership and want to bring an employer partner on, these are kind of the first four strategies that we use. Sadie, was there any questions before I move on?
You're
Nope.
good.
Okay. Okay. So once we have our shared vision, right, it has been documented. We know the roles and responsibilities of each, right? The agency, the individual, or that employer partner, right? What are those next best steps, which is kind of what brought us here today, right? We have a lot of employer partners that say, hey, we need just some basic training for our employees to better collaborate with your interns or support their colleague, right, in the workplace. So providing disability awareness training, right? That can be done at a very basic introductory level to more customized training that can go along with time, right? As that partnerships build, you're going to see the successes and the potential challenges or barriers that come into place. And that's where you can really work together to customize those training for your staff, right? Or anyone that's coming in contact with that employee or individual. Establish clear roles and communication, kind of just saying this again, right? Make sure that's documented. We actually spend an immense amount of time in also documenting the type of communication that is best for each type of employer partner. I have some employer partners that say, please text me. I have some that say emailing is best, right? So it's also having a really clear understanding of how you get a hold of people and what is the best method for those employer partners. And then using data to drive commitment. So I would say where we use this a lot, right, is within our pre-apprenticeships. So being able to show the employer partners how students are working towards competencies in their tailored training and making sure that employers are a part of that to make sure if a student or an individual is in a training program that's leading towards employment, right, that we are really looking at that data to drive decisions. Okay, so the last three were, once that partnership is established, clear roles and responsibilities are documented, we really want to start getting into training opportunities, clear communication, and data-driven decisions. Okay, all right. So, clear communication and defined roles. This is something that I have encountered lately as our ask of our employers have increased, right? So no longer is it just, can my student have a 6-week unpaid internship in this career field so they can have some career exploration, be able to identify their preference and their interest in the workplace. We might have multiple asks of our employer partners. So this is really where that clear communication and defined roles come into place. I think it's important we understand the different types of roles an employer can take in preparing an individual for employment, right? So it might be an inclusive employer. So as a job developer, I might just be directly contacting an employee or an employer saying, I have an employee that fits this job description, and we're just doing a direct hire. This could be a job developer partnership where we're doing a little bit more customized employment, right? Where an individual has some specific employment needs that fall outside of a specified job description. It could be an internship site host, right? Where they're just doing short-term internships. Could be a disability advocate. We have many employer partners that are just part of different networks that are advocating on the behalf of our center. But those are also very important partnerships. So I think it's really important, again, that you going back to that one of the first slides, understand your ask, right? And then make it very clear to the employer partner of how that's fulfilling a need for us within our center. So it could be a part-time, full-time employment. It might be a work-based learning experience. It could be a co-op or internship, an apprenticeship, or even for some of our TAP students, a service learning, right? So they could receive class credit. So make sure you understand the ask of that employer partner and that they understand the role that they are playing. Any questions on that, Sadie?
No, but I love this. I love what you did here, Katie. This really
There's a lot,
shows,
right?
yeah, but it really shows the options of how employers can contribute to this work. I really like that.
And I do think but sometimes for employers, having all the options can also be overwhelming, right? So, or even just the difference in language sometimes, where I have an employer partner, right, that is using the term co-op, right? Well, co-op and apprenticeship in the state's eyes, you're saying the same thing, but for that employer, we're not, right? So you have to work through this process with them and make sure that they do have a clear understanding of their role. Because these are the types of terms that are thrown at them from a million different people all the time when they're looking for that engagement. So again, know what you're asking, know your goals, know how you want to interact with that employer partner, and make sure they understand the direct impact of that collaboration. Okay, I am not going to spend a whole lot on this one, but I did provide a lot of resources for this as well. But it is important that employer partners understand the incentives and the type of supports that can be offered to them. So yes, there are the tax incentives, but there's also a lot of grants and different types of free support to employer partners that they may not be aware of, right? Free training and assistance. So I actually, on another slide here, I gathered some of the free resources, that I have used over the years. The Jan Accommodation Network? Anyways, there's a whole list of free resources to employers, but it is important that they do understand the incentives, because sometimes those champions need that information, right, to help that partnership become more sustainable. So there are tax incentives, there's grants and extra support that are free to employer partners. So I just think it's important when you're building these relationships, you are sharing the information that you have. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this slide. Okay, developing sustainable partnerships, so training and support. So like we talked, there are so many different types of trainings that can be offered to employers. So we have disability and awareness training, right? Just that sensitivity training, some of your basics, those really important rules, right? If you're hiring an individual with disability, what do you need to be aware of and what does your team need to be aware of, right? To help that person feel like a part of the community there and that they can continue to grow with support. Legal and policy training, inclusive recruitment practices, work accommodation training, onboarding and mentorship. We are finding that onboarding is even becoming more and more technical with time. So when you are bringing on an individual with an intellectual developmental disability, what might need to be revised within that onboarding, or what supported services need to be put in place to make sure that that employee can get through that onboarding process and have a clear understanding of that. And then the ongoing support and retention. Your employees are going to grow and change with time, right? Your team is going to grow and change with time. So how do those supports need to grow and change? So again, that ongoing evaluation process is really important for collaboration to be sustainable. I don't know why that happened. I clearly clicked an animation button that I shouldn't. I don't know why that's happening either. Let's see if we finally get to the other side. Oh, we got all kinds of fun stuff there. Okay. So these, again, and I love AI because you can be like, can you please put this into a nice table for me that everybody can read clearly? So these were just we have a lot of free trainings, and I thought it'd be funny that we can also do customized training through RAAC. So I also provided this to become a member if you would like customized training through RAAC. But again, there are lots of free resources out there that are super easy to use. So we just wanted to provide this for any employer partners that might be present today. Check these out. Again, I gain a lot of information from these, and it might be just a good starting point that then you can grow from. Okay, so kind of the last thing. So evaluation and continuous improvement. I really just wanted to provide you with the example of how we do this at the IDD Education Center, but I think the process can easily be replicated with anyone. So for us, we are evaluating our active employer partnerships. And I say active because, again, we have hundreds and hundreds of employer partners, but we're not always using them on a continual basis, right? So for our active partnerships, we are always evaluating that collaboration or the support structures that we have put in place for that employer partner. So we always set an evaluation timeline. For us, it is done every semester and then done again annually. And then you need to make sure you have an identified individual that is going to engage in that evaluation process. So for who from your team is going to be supporting that. So for us, we have employment support specialists that are in those employment sites on a weekly basis. They're engaging with job coaches, employer partners, natural supports. So they're really going to have a lot of the most relevant information. So they're a huge part of this. Also, our vocational coordinators, we have vocational coordinators across our center and each of our programs. They do a big part in our evaluation. They have a huge part in our evaluation process and do a little bit more work with our interns and employees. And then the primary job developer, which is myself. So I am on an annual basis and every semester working with, right, who are those champions in that partnership? And I'm reaching back out to them, identifying, you know, any challenges or barriers we had in working through those. Making sure you're identifying the essential parties. There's a lot of members included, potentially included in this process. So human resources, the employees themselves, natural supports and mentors, managers and supervisors, job coaches. These are just some of the people that may be involved. But make sure when you are evaluating that employment scenario or that collaboration, that really all of the essential parties are giving their feedback. That is going to help that relationship be sustainable. Identify the evaluation areas. What do we want feedback on? What went well, what changes we need to make. So this could be in the actual training or competencies, job descriptions. Sometimes when we create customized job descriptions, those might need to be a little bit flexible and we can edit that with time. Different accommodations that have been put in place for individuals or even going further, those individual level supports. And then for us, and responsibility supports that accountability and then the sustainability of that partnership. Okay. That is what I have. Any questions before we move on to Jenna?
No questions in the chat
Great.
right now.
Perfect. It's all yours, Jenna.
All right, thanks, Katie. So as you all just saw, Katie gave a really great overview of kind of the employer side of things, right? So we're gonna dive a little bit more into supporting the actual person that has IDD. And obviously that is more of a global and holistic approach for some. It does require a significant collaboration with those employment partners. But I wanted to kind of review some strategies, especially as you think about the entire timeline of job development, job seeking, ongoing training within those job sites. So Katie, you can go ahead to the next slide. So, like I said, there's a cycle of support that comes in the workplace, right? There are things that happen before we even step foot into the workplace, right? Preparing for employment, going through that entire process of job seeking, that probably looks a little bit different for many of you that are job developers. For the IDD Ed Center, right? Katie and I have kind of lined up quite a significant amount of work that we do on the front end to make sure that when we do go in to that job seeking and job carving that Katie and her vocational team do, that we have a really strong understanding of what that individual might need to be successful. Then we go into kind of that initial onboarding and training, right? That learning period that comes, everybody's getting to know each other. We're figuring out what supports work best. Maybe we're identifying some of those natural supports. And then some of those ongoing processes that lead to job retention and kind of sustain that employer relationship, help that person be successful in the workplace and build their independence. So Katie, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So as we're preparing for employment, right, with this individual, and this is going to be primarily relevant, right, to those of you that are on vocational teams, perhaps, but as employers, you can kind of see some of these ways that maybe you could adapt and support that preparing for employment. So the first one being that collaborative goal planning, right? We talk a lot about person-centered planning. It's a huge initiative in the state right now, right? All ISPs are based on the person-centered planning process. But when we think about, you want to think about those larger goals, right, of working towards your general career development, but also what are maybe some of those micro goals in the workplace so that way you can begin to intentionally target specific skill sets. Then I'm a big proponent of career portfolios, right? Something mobile that a job seeker can say, hey, my resume might not fully say who I am and what I am capable of and what my skill sets are, but here's an entire portfolio that can kind of lay out all of those experiences and the skills that have come from it, especially if they have those pieces of information well documented from a vocational team of what are the target skills that this person might have been learning in a pre-apprenticeship or in an internship, because sometimes those words are interpreted differently based on the employer. And same way with alternative resume and interview options, employers with some flexibility, making sure that you're still screening for those crucial skills and some of that experience that might be required to be successful in a job. There are multiple ways to receive that information, right? So one of the components that when I was working in job development and the interview process is mandatory for many, many, many jobs, especially ones that are paid. What are ways that interview process can maybe be adapted a little bit, but still aligning with the requirements of a workplace? You look at big companies like Microsoft, they have an inclusive hiring program that if you self-disclose your ability or your disability throughout that process, they will provide a decent bit of accommodations within even the interview process, right? Breaking it up over a couple of days, providing those interview questions ahead of time to allow for more processing time, right? You're still screening applicants that are well qualified for the job, but you are making it more accessible to a wider range of people that might require a bit more support to prepare for a job interview. So that's kind of the preparing, right? Before we even get into a workplace. Katie, do you want to go to the next? Thank you. So then, right, you've gotten the job, you've started, okay, we've got skills and onboarding and training that has to get done. And we also have to, build those relationships with that employer. So this kind of comes in two primary domains, right? So supporting the actual skill development. What are the crucial skills that employee will need in order to be successful on that job? And then maybe within that work experience, think about building some time in for them to practice that, right? And also, there are not always skills to be developing that are appropriate to develop actively in the workplace. Maybe it is that you take that out to a more controlled setting, especially if it is, pieces that can increase efficiency at the workplace, safety components, right? There's this concept called the dignity of risk. It's highly prevalent in inclusive post-secondary education as a general kind of overview of what learning can look like, right? And it assumes that everybody has the opportunity to learn. Everybody has the opportunity to take a risk. Starting a new job is a perfect example of taking a risk, right? But if you're a job developer or somebody that is working directly with those people to seek that job, there are some skills that just need to be taught in a controlled setting, right? Some of those baseline things, again, things around safety with the goal of progressing throughout and getting into an inclusive setting. But identifying those skills, right? Especially if you are able to know of a career pathway and identify kind of those general skills or responsibilities that they might have in a workplace, right? You have somebody that wants to go into customer service, be practicing some of those adaptive and kind of base level skills on what that looks like. Somebody wants to go into something with, healthcare or working in a medical setting, go ahead and learn those skills in a more controlled setting before, so you're setting them up for success when they start a job. Then, right, a lot of people brought it up in the chat as we were getting started, the importance of natural supports in the workplace. Same with those visual supports. Now, this is where a strong vocational team really comes in on especially developing those visual supports, because where an employer might very well know the processes that are expected within that workplace and the expectations of their employees, that vocational team can be more responsive to the actual person and saying, I see this, right, document that you have, this process that you have. I think it makes sense. Let's figure out how to break it down to make sure that employee with IDD understands the expectation and has an opportunity to learn in a way that makes sense for them, right? I'll talk a little bit more about visual supports too, as we kind of get into those communication recommendations. Oh, go back. Sorry, Katie. There we go. And then again, the one natural supports, you can never underestimate the importance of a natural support, right? So identifying potential mentors within that workplace setting, maybe people that individual works with a lot, people that go out of their way to talk. And then with those people, with that collaborative team, you really want to make sure that you're sharing the primary information about what that individual that's being supported needs to be successful, and also provide some of that training to those natural supports. Like Katie said, that can be in the form of free resources that those people get to be like, okay, you're talking about task analyses. It's my first exposure to them. I'm not really sure what that means. There are free resources out there that you can provide to those natural supports. Remaining mindful of, those are people that are supporting their coworkers. They're not job coaches. And again, I think that's really where that responsibility mapping that Katie was talking about really comes into play, and saying, what is your role in creating an inclusive workplace setting versus what is the role of a vocational team? And then what is really just the responsibility of the individual? So Katie, you can go to the next one. Thank you. So Katie talked a lot about kind of regular evaluations and opportunities to make data-driven decisions. Data collection, right, is obviously paramount to that happening. So having consistent systems on what you are looking for, making that skill-based, making sure that all of that is documented really well. And that can happen, from the job coaching staff. It can happen from others in the workplace. Maybe, it's a tool that the individual themselves is using to kind of self-monitor and kind of collect that data to say, how do we know that they're building independence and they're acquiring the skills that are going to be mandatory for them to be successful in that workplace. And then that performance feedback being provided to somebody is crucial to any skill development. And that is not even specific to people with IDD, right? Everybody learns well from high quality feedback that is forward moving, but also you can't really understate the importance of allowing for some self-reflection and self-evaluation. One of the pieces that I highly recommend, and Katie and I have been working on kind of allowing for that space and that process to be happening on a regular basis, is having a really set criteria of what you are evaluating the person on, having the individual maybe self-score and say, for attendance, I think I succeed and I'm above expectations in that, but having that employer rate them on the exact same scale as you're kind of going into those conversations where maybe it is, a midterm review or their annual review if their job is coming up. It can be really clear on saying, what does the employer identify as me doing really well? What do I think my strengths are? And then maybe where are we not connecting? Because that is where you can begin to channel a lot of your energy into specifically targeting some of those skills. And it does allow, I think, for the individual to kind of continue and begin to understand what are the skills that are really important, and maybe where can that self-awareness and self-determination really boost for them. So that employer feedback is incredibly important, and to have that delivered in a way that's accessible to the individual is very important. And feedback, can happen in informal settings, but maybe it is that to provide high quality feedback and feedback that's actionable for the individual, you provide kind of a structure within that to help them feel supported, make sure that the employer is getting their point across to the individual, and make sure the individual is getting that feedback in a way that's accessible that they can then act upon. Because feedback doesn't really have any power unless it comes with a way to improve. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into just those strategies for direct communication. And I talk about this as somebody that is engaging with an individual with IDD in the workplace in any way, right? Those that do a lot of that job development and those vocational services for people with IDD, you might see a lot of this and be like, well, yeah, that's kind of just a given. But though, for a lot of people that haven't worked with individuals with IDD, it can be really hard and a big barrier for them to say, I'm not sure how to engage with them or what my role is or what the realistic expectations are for this employee. You can go ahead to the next slide, Katie. So I first just wanted to highlight a little bit of the research that comes, right? So that way we're not speaking on this from an anecdotal standpoint, right? we can witness the frustrations that happen for people with IDD, but there is a pretty significant amount of research regarding the frustrations and the barriers that people with IDD have when it comes to communicating with care providers, right? A lot of that comes from the deficits in knowledge and the communication from providers, or the quality of support offered from service providers or caregivers. So Katie, you can go to the next slide. The one that we can really target, right, is that deficit in knowledge and maybe the lack of communication from people that work with or for that individual. So there's only so much we can do to address systematic things or systemic issues, but communication and knowing how to support people with IDD, we can learn. So within this research study, they were kind of discussing the frustrations that people have when working with providers, healthcare providers, employers, caretakers, and a lot of it really came from a lack of training and exposure in order to learn how to best communicate with people with IDD, or maybe those people are allowing their biases to kind of come to the forefront when communicating, and that might be associated with negative beliefs about individuals with IDD and their ability, right? Sometimes vocational partners or employment partners can set low expectations for people with IDD, which they might see as being kind of a welcoming and accessible setting. But really, if there are clear expectations for employees, we want to provide them the opportunity to meet those as much as possible. So adapting the expectation without lowering it, right? And everybody sees it. We all know people infantilize people with IDD, right? Even if they are full-grown adults, and maybe disregard the direct communication and the importance of talking to the individual themselves. Maybe instead they speak with a family representative, a support staff. This might look like, you're going into a workplace and there's a natural support there that has questions and wants to figure out how to collaborate. And rather than turning to the individual themselves, maybe they turn to a job coach. Even if it's a simple question of, do they like this? That is easily a question that can be targeted to the individual. If there are more complex things where you're trying to understand systematic components, that is the time to kind of reach out to a vocational coordinator and have a conversation that's more structured. And then the last one, right, being using language that's unclear or makes understanding inaccessible. There are ways to convey your point without it being filled with jargon or abstract language that can sometimes be really difficult to wrap your head around, and then makes it difficult for the individual that you're working with to understand how to move forward. Perfect, thank you. This is, just a statement that I really like to make as people who currently or will engage with individuals with IDD on a regular basis. It's really crucial that we understand the best methods of communication to ensure that individuals feel empowered, supported, and self-determined, and that you feel capable of supporting that person to reach their full potential in a workplace. Go to the next. Perfect, thank you. So there are some general communication recommendations, and we'll dive into each of these specifically, but really they kind of come from using language, right? Utilizing that person first language and really making sure that you have an understanding around disability awareness itself, utilizing clear, plain language when talking directly with people with IDD, and then providing those objective, direct instructions, because nobody likes to get directions that they don't fully understand. Then kind of coming into that problem solving component, when feedback is a natural part of skill acquisition, and also just being in a workplace, feedback occurs at many levels. How do you provide that feedback that is in a strengths focused way? And also, how can we engage in that collaborative problem solving, both with the individual, but maybe some of the support providers that they have as well. And then that last one just being, really having that patience and flexibility and just thinking creatively when engaging with people with IDD. Again, that can look like adjusting your method of communication. That can look like, maybe seeing if the end result is the same for the person, and that's what matters. Maybe figuring out how to adapt that, build in some of those accommodations, providing some wait time, especially. You can go to the next slide, Katie. Perfect, thank you. So when we talk about disability research and disability services, person first language comes up a lot, right? So I do want to offer this with a disclaimer that there are many people with a disability that do prefer to use kind of label first language. You see it especially in the autism community. However, a safe or kind of best practice in pursuing is using that person first language, right? So rather than saying a disabled person or a special needs kid, say what it is, and it's an individual with a disability. Largely because people tend to tiptoe around the term disability, and we know that disability isn't a curse word, right? Disability is the way that people are diagnosed to be able to receive the supports that are necessary for them to be successful. So erring on the side of caution, using person, individual, student, employee with a disability is preferred until you know that person's preferences, because it is really their right. And also just kind of consistently being reminded and keeping it at the forefront of your mind that our language is linked to stigmas and biases. Everybody has them, right? It's an inherent human trait, but be aware of your own as you're interacting with individuals with IDD. Because while you might hold those biases and are working to unpack them, you don't want to allow those to negatively impact the partnership and the collaboration that you can have with an individual with IDD or their support team. Thank you. So I'm sure everybody has heard of the feedback sandwich. It is one that I am especially a believer in, right? Primarily also focusing on, rather than, only identifying the things that they're doing wrong, think of ways to provide feedback that focuses on forward moving feedback and identifying those strengths and capitalizing on those strengths, right? So you can think about this from a deficit-based versus growth-oriented feedback. So what many people see as weaknesses are an assumption that the employee can't do something. With the help of a strong vocational team or a strong job developer, there are many ways to see those weaknesses and identify them as areas for improvement, and then specifically pinpoint those rather than making the assumption that that employee isn't capable of doing something. We want to presume that competence and think about ways that we can provide additional support, or you can seek additional support to maybe get over that hump. Positive feedback, but constructive feedback is really important too. So if there are pieces of the job that need to be done in a really specific way and they're not getting done, it does not support that person or your organization in any way to say, well, no, it's fine, somebody else will come fix it, right? Don't gloss over those necessary improvements, but maybe consider a way to make sure that when you are providing the feedback on those and those required skill sets, that it is forward moving, right? But people tend to, worry that they're going to upset somebody or that they're pushing them too much. But the way that people grow is by trying new things and being challenged. And when you have a collaborative team, you can know how to maybe allow that space for that growth in a safe setting that is going to be conducive to their success. Go to the next one. Thank you. So objective, direct instructions, right? We talk about plain language all the time, making sure that the instructions that we're giving to somebody don't have a ton of technical jargon, or if they do have a ton of technical jargon, making sure that there is a way for somebody to see that and understand exactly what it means. Right, that other one being kind of setting those clear and measurable expectations. Katie talked about it from the employer side of things, right? Where it needs to be clear so everybody understands their role as an employer. That is also a way to ensure that that person has a clear understanding of what's expected. Everybody benefits from understanding the why. So, rather than saying, well, this is just part of the job, you have to do it, explaining why of, getting this step done has this specific implication. Here's what happens when it doesn't, because sometimes people just need that extra, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Why do we have to do it this way? A why is always helpful to help people be a bit more committed to that organization. Tell them exactly what you need, right? Exactly what needs to be done. Clear instructions. It might take a little bit more time on the forefront of things, but it does guarantee that that job is going to be done well. And it really, in the long term, saves everyone time. And then I always kind of approach things with clear as kind, right? If there's a problem, talk about that problem, then talk about a way to solve that problem, right? Don't give kind of that abstract feedback of, oh, it was okay, but maybe try it better next time or try again, right? Giving a specific way for them to correct anything clearly in a way that's accessible to them is what is going to be most effective for creating a supportive work environment. Go to the next one, Katie. Thank you. We talk a lot about communication preferences, right? Those visual supports in the workplace. So there are many ways that people can communicate through written language, through pictures, verbally, utilizing models significantly, whether that's in person or video models for those people that you're working with to get that information that's relevant to them in a way that makes sense to them. So as kind of just a general rule of thumb, you know, Katie and I do this on a very, very, very specific task level, even of multi-step processes or task analyses being so prevalent in the workplace, because then you can pinpoint specific skills or specific steps in that to then be able to coach according to that, right? So a lot of you all probably do utilize visual supports or universal design in the workplace just naturally without even knowing or intentionally making it that way. But I'm, you know, having those checklists in a way that makes sense. A lot of individuals with IDD when they're on the work site utilize timers to understand kind of at what point is it time to shift or transition to their next task. Or, you know, they have kind of the mobile checklist, and that can be visual or that can be fully written. And then video models are a really, really high quality way to continue to provide that information and some training without requiring the staff to be there all the time, rather than, you know, one of your current employees training that individual and spending, you know, a month training, which isn't sustainable for anybody's business. Thinking about ways that you can utilize some of those videos or allow for that self-reflection time. Go to the next one, Katie. Thank you. So some key takeaways, right? For any type of successful job placement, collaboration is key. Collaboration is key with those employers. Collaboration is key with the individuals themselves. Collaboration is key within your vocational team and when you're identifying those natural supports. Clear as kind. Clear as kind, both in setting those clear expectations and also using language that is clear for that person to understand. Again, having that growth-oriented mindset means that everything is a learning opportunity, even the mistakes. That can be really difficult when you are trying to, you know, move your business or your organization along, and things happen, people learn, right? Katie, can you go back? Sorry.
It's like stuck
That's
Up,
okay.
down.
I'll just pull
Okay.
up my slide and make sure I have them all.
That is really weird. I'm so
That's
sorry,
okay.
guys. It's frozen.
It happens. That's okay. The last two, right, that I have on my screen that you all can't see currently are respecting that dignity of risk and utilizing it in a training model as well. And then providing multiple learning opportunities, get creative with it, right? Maybe allow that person, there are multiple tasks that can be replicated outside of a work setting. An example that I think about a lot when I was working with a young man that was pursuing a career in administrative assisting, was working at an HR department, managing a lot of their employee files, making sure that the company kind of had the information that they needed to keep their personnel files up to date, to ensure that people are up to date on their trainings, right? And also just managing the physical files. Alphabetization of those files was obviously required to make sure that that system would continue to work efficiently. And a skill that he needed to work on with, you know, seeing the order, making sure that he was able to cross-reference the list to ensure that files were where they were supposed to be, something that can feel like a pretty high level and multi-step process. He didn't need to sit in that office and, you know, make a ton of mistakes and maybe, you know, provide or create a little bit of frustration with somebody that has to take some more time to work with him specifically on, you know, the making sure that things are in alphabetical order. That's something that you can very easily replicate outside of the work setting with, 45 manila folders and fake names and a fake list for that person to kind of replicate that task and have multiple opportunities to practice that skill. This would especially be prominent for those people that are vocational coordinators or job developers, seeing kind of what are those pieces. And that really comes from significant worksite analyses of understanding that worksite in depth and what the expectations are, watching it, and then thinking about ways that you can coach with that over time. So now we can go to the last slide. Thank you all so much. I hope this was helpful. We have about 30 minutes. Sadie, I know you dropped some stuff in the chat for feedback and some reminders about the next session. Katie, I hope you're okay with it, but I did put your email on here. If any of you would like to reach out to us, I know Katie and her team have a lot of resources available, or if you would be interested in some of that more, specialized training that is offered through RAAC, Sadie or Katie are fantastic people to get in touch about that with. And then if you're wanting to look on social media about some of the things that we're up to, we're on Instagram and Facebook. Our handles are right here. And then Sadie, I know you had, I believe at one point dropped a link to our website in the chat. So thank you all for your time. Does anybody have questions or comments? Sadie, I'm pretty sure that the answer to Eddie's question is a yes.
Yes. Yep. So I am recording this session and I'll get the slides from Katie and Jenna, and I will be emailing it out to everybody who registered for this event. And I will include the survey link as well for your feedback. One of the questions on the survey link is if you would like to receive a certificate of completion for CPDUs or CEUs. So if that is something of interest as well, make sure you fill out that survey so I can get you your certificate. And then, yeah, we have the third session coming up on June 2nd. So please register for that if you're interested. We have a lot of events happening with RAAC, and I didn't even introduce I tend to forget to introduce myself these days because I feel like I'm on these, I feel like everybody knows me by now, but I am the director of the Regional Autism Advisory Council, and part of what I've started or kind of started up again as we acquired the Regional Autism Advisory Council last year is providing more trainings and professional development to the community. So that's what I'm doing, and I hope that it's beneficial to you all. There will always be free sessions, but we are instilling a new membership structure for RAAC. So at all different levels, there's always going to be free options. There's always going to be free options on our website, but there will be exclusive opportunities for members as well. So if that is something of interest to you or your organizations or your schools, please check out the website, the RAAC website. There's the membership information and structure linked to that page. So definitely check that out or reach out to me as well. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Jenna and Katie. And if you all have any questions that come up, you can always email me at raac_cincy@uc.edu. And I'm putting that in the chat as well. Other than that, I think we covered everything. So thank you all.
I wrote down both your emails, so I'll reach out if I have any questions and
Perfect.
put a list
Thank you.
together of my thoughts.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Melinda.
Bye, Melinda.
Okay.